The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered behind the metal barriers, cameras ready to capture the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Among them stood General Martinez, a decorated military officer from Argentina, who had arrived in London just 2 days earlier for an important diplomatic mission. His chest displayed rows of colorful ribbons and medals, earned through decades of distinguished service in his homeland's army. General Martinez had requested this private viewing through official diplomatic channels, hoping to witness the legendary precision of the Queen's Guard up close. He wore his formal military dress uniform, complete with gold braiding and ceremonial sword as protocol demanded for such occasions. The British Ministry of Defense had granted his request, understanding the importance of maintaining good relations with their South American ally. As the general waited behind the designated area, he observed the meticulous preparations taking place. The guards moved with mechanical precision, their red tunics immaculate and their bearskin hats perfectly positioned. Each soldier stood motionless as statues, their eyes fixed straight ahead, seemingly unaware of the growing crowd of spectators gathering to witness the ancient ceremony. The general had studied British military traditions extensively before his visit, reading about the history and significance of the Queen's Guard. He knew these soldiers were not merely ceremonial figures, but active members of the British Army's elite regiments. Their role as protectors of the royal family carried immense responsibility and required unwavering discipline. What the general didn't fully understand, however, were the strict protocols that governed every aspect of the Guard's behavior during their duties. These rules had been established over centuries and were followed without exception, regardless of who might be watching or what circumstances might arise during their watch. Standing 6 feet tall with graying temples and a commanding presence, General Martinez had grown accustomed to receiving immediate recognition and respect wherever he traveled. In his own country, junior officers would snap to attention upon seeing his approach, and foreign dignitaries regularly acknowledged his rank with appropriate military courtesies. The ceremony was about to begin, and the general positioned himself for the best possible view. He adjusted his uniform one final time, ensuring his medals were properly displayed and his posture reflected the dignity of his position. The morning air carried the sounds of London traffic in the distance, but within the palace grounds, an almost sacred silence prevailed. As the first notes of military music began to echo across the courtyard, the general felt a surge of anticipation. This moment represented more than mere tourism for him, and it was an opportunity to witness one of the world's most famous military traditions and perhaps establish a connection with his British counterparts that could benefit future diplomatic relations between their nations. Little did General Martinez know that his understanding of military protocol, while extensive in his own cultural context, would soon prove inadequate for navigating the rigid traditions of the Queen's Guard. The ancient rules governing these elite soldiers recognized no exceptions, regardless of rank, nationality, or diplomatic status. What seemed like a simple gesture of military courtesy to the general would soon trigger a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about international military etiquette. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test both men's commitment to their respective military codes and demonstrate the unwavering nature of British military tradition in the face of unexpected circumstances. The ceremony commenced with the arrival of the new guard, their synchronized footsteps creating a rhythmic percussion against the palace courtyard. Each soldier moved in perfect unison, their rifles held at precisely the same angle, their faces expressionless beneath the towering bearskin hats. The crowd of onlookers pressed closer to the barriers, mesmerized by the display of military precision. General Martinez watched with professional appreciation as the guards executed their drill movements. Having commanded thousands of soldiers throughout his career, he could recognize the countless hours of training required to achieve such flawless coordination. The guards' ability to maintain perfect formation while navigating the complex choreography of the ceremony impressed even his experienced eye. As the ceremony progressed, one particular guard caught the general's attention. Lance Corporal Williams stood at his post near the palace entrance, his bearing exemplifying everything the Queen's Guard represented. The young soldier had served for 3 years in this prestigious position, following tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq with the Coldstream Guards. His record was spotless, his dedication absolute, and his understanding of protocol uncompromising. Williams had been briefed that morning about the presence of foreign dignitaries among the spectators, including General Martinez. However, his orders remained unchanged from any other day: maintain absolute discipline, follow established protocols without deviation, and protect the dignity of the monarchy through unwavering adherence to tradition. The general observed Williams with growing interest, noting the soldier's youth and obvious competence. In his mind, he began formulating a plan to acknowledge the Guard's professionalism through a gesture of military courtesy. Such exchanges between officers and enlisted personnel were common in the Argentine military and served to strengthen bonds between different ranks and services. As the main ceremony reached its climax, with the old guard preparing to march away, General Martinez decided to act on his impulse. He had noticed that Lance Corporal Williams would soon be assuming a solo post near the palace gates, providing an ideal opportunity for the respectful military acknowledgement the general intended to offer. The crowds began to thin as the formal ceremony concluded, leaving smaller groups of tourists scattered around the palace perimeter. This created the perfect moment for the general to approach the barriers closest to Williams's position. He straightened his uniform once more, ensuring his rank insignia were clearly visible, and prepared to demonstrate the international brotherhood of arms that he believed transcended national boundaries. Williams, meanwhile, had transitioned to his stationary post and assumed the traditional position of attention. His rifle was held at the precise angle required by regulation, his eyes focused on a distant point, and his mind concentrated on maintaining the absolute stillness demanded of his role. He was aware of the dispersing crowd but trained to ignore all external distractions unless they posed a direct threat to royal security. The general's confidence in his planned gesture stemmed from decades of positive interactions with foreign military personnel. Throughout his career, he had found that proper military courtesy opened doors and created connections that often proved valuable in both professional and diplomatic contexts. He had no reason to suspect that this situation would prove any different. What neither man fully comprehended was that they were operating under fundamentally different sets of rules and expectations. The general's framework was built on flexibility, adaptation, and relationship building within military hierarchies. Williams operated within a system that prized absolute adherence to established protocol above all other considerations, including personal recognition or international diplomatic courtesy. The convergence of these two military philosophies was about to create a situation that would challenge both men's understanding of duty, respect, and the true meaning of military discipline in the modern world. With the main ceremony concluded and most tourists moving toward the palace gates, General Martinez saw his opportunity. He approached the barrier separating him from Lance Corporal Williams, positioning himself directly in the guard's line of sight. The general's military bearing was impeccable as he prepared to render what he considered an appropriate salute between brother officers. Drawing himself to full attention, General Martinez raised his right hand in a crisp military salute, holding the position with the precision that had been drilled into him during his early training, decades ago. His eyes remained fixed on Williams, expecting the traditional acknowledgement that protocol demanded when a senior officer rendered honors to a subordinate. The general's chest swelled with pride as he demonstrated the respect he held for the legendary Queen's Guard. Lance Corporal Williams, however, remained completely motionless. His training had been explicit and uncompromising. Guards on duty do not respond to any external stimuli unless directly ordered by their commanding officer or faced with a genuine security threat. The presence of a foreign general, regardless of rank or intention, did not constitute grounds for breaking from established protocol. Seconds passed with the general holding his salute, waiting for the acknowledgement that never came. Williams continued to stare straight ahead, his expression unchanged, his rifle position unwavering. To the casual observer, it might have appeared that the guard simply hadn't noticed the salute, but the general's military experience told him otherwise. This was a deliberate non-response. The general's initial confusion quickly transformed into something approaching indignation. In his world, military courtesy was sacred, and the failure to return a properly rendered salute constituted a serious breach of international military etiquette. He had offered respect and received what he interpreted as a calculated insult in return. Maintaining his salute for several more seconds, General Martinez hoped that perhaps the guard was simply taking time to process the situation or waiting for permission from a superior officer. But Williams remained frozen in place, giving no indication that he was even aware of the general's presence, much less his gesture of military courtesy. Finally, the general lowered his hand, his face flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. The few remaining tourists in the vicinity had begun to notice the interaction, some pointing and whispering among themselves about the apparent snub delivered to the obviously high-ranking foreign officer. Williams, for his part, was fully aware of the general's presence and salute. His peripheral vision had registered the approach and gesture, but his training overrode any personal impulse to respond. The guard's manual was explicit: maintain position, ignore distractions, and under no circumstances acknowledge civilians or foreign dignitaries without direct orders from British command structure. The general's diplomatic mission had emphasized the importance of building positive relationships with British military leadership. This public rejection of his courteous gesture felt like a personal and professional humiliation that could potentially impact the broader goals of his visit. His military pride, carefully cultivated over decades of distinguished service, had been wounded in front of witnesses. As he stood there processing what had just occurred, General Martinez began to formulate his response. His training and experience suggested that this situation required escalation through proper channels. The guard's behavior, while perhaps technically correct according to some interpretation of British protocol, had crossed a line of basic military courtesy that transcended national boundaries. The general's mind raced with possibilities for addressing this slight. He could report the incident through diplomatic channels, request a meeting with British military leadership, or pursue other avenues for ensuring that proper respect was accorded to visiting foreign officers in the future. What he couldn't know was that his interpretation of events was about to place him on a collision course with centuries of unwavering British military tradition. Determined to address what he perceived as a serious breach of military protocol, General Martinez decided to take immediate action. He walked along the barrier until he reached the palace security checkpoint, where he presented his diplomatic credentials to the duty officer. His voice carried the authority of his rank as he requested to speak with the commanding officer responsible for the Queen's Guard. The British security personnel, trained to handle diplomatic situations with care, quickly recognized the potential for an international incident. Within minutes, they had contacted Major Thompson, the duty officer responsible for that day's guard operations. Thompson, a seasoned officer with 15 years of experience managing sensitive situations involving foreign dignitaries, agreed to meet with the general immediately. When Major Thompson arrived, General Martinez wasted no time in explaining his grievance. He described the incident in detail, emphasizing his rank, the diplomatic importance of his mission, and what he characterized as the deliberate disrespect shown by Lance Corporal Williams. The general's tone remained professional, but his underlying anger was unmistakable. Major Thompson listened carefully, taking notes and asking clarifying questions about the exact sequence of events. As an experienced officer, he understood both the general's perspective and the absolute nature of the protocols governing his guards. However, he also recognized that this situation required delicate handling to avoid damaging British-Argentine military relations. After hearing the general's account, Major Thompson explained the historical context and current regulations governing the Queen's Guard. He described how these protocols had evolved over centuries to ensure the security and dignity of the monarchy. The guards, he explained, were trained to maintain absolute discipline and to respond only to threats or direct orders from their chain of command. General Martinez listened to the explanation, but remained unconvinced. In his military culture, the failure to acknowledge a superior officer's salute was unthinkable, regardless of ceremonial duties or security protocols. He argued that international military courtesy should supersede local customs, especially when dealing with allied nations and diplomatic visitors. The conversation continued for nearly 30 minutes, with both officers maintaining professional demeanor while representing fundamentally different military philosophies. Major Thompson appreciated the general's position, but emphasized that changing established protocols was impossible without authorization from the highest levels of military command. As their discussion progressed, Major Thompson began to realize that this incident could have implications far beyond a simple misunderstanding between two military personnel. The general's diplomatic status and the potential for media coverage made this a situation that required immediate escalation to his superiors. Meanwhile, Lance Corporal Williams continued his duty shift, unaware that his adherence to protocol had triggered a significant diplomatic discussion. His training had prepared him for exactly this type of situation, though he had never experienced it personally. The guard remained focused on his responsibilities, trusting that his officers would handle any complications arising from his correct following of established procedures. The general's frustration grew as he realized that Major Thompson, while sympathetic to his concerns, had no authority to modify the behavior of the guards or to discipline Williams for what the general considered insubordination. The British officer's explanations about tradition and security protocols seemed like bureaucratic excuses rather than legitimate justifications for the disrespect he had experienced. By this point, word of the incident had begun to spread through the palace security network. Senior officers were being briefed about the situation, and protocols for managing potential diplomatic incidents were being reviewed. The simple gesture of a salute had escalated into a complex international relations challenge that would require careful navigation to avoid lasting damage to military cooperation between the two nations. What neither officer could anticipate was how quickly the situation would attract attention from the highest levels of both military and diplomatic leadership, transforming a moment of perceived disrespect into a test case for international military protocol in the modern era. Within hours of the incident, news of the confrontation had reached the highest echelons of British military command. General Sir Patrick Williams, Chief of the General Staff, was briefed about the situation during his afternoon briefing. The potential for diplomatic fallout with Argentina, a key ally in South America, made this incident a priority requiring immediate attention. Simultaneously, the Argentine embassy in London had been contacted by General Martinez, who felt compelled to report what he viewed as a serious diplomatic slight. The ambassador, Maria Gonzalez, understood the delicate nature of the situation and immediately reached out to her contacts within the Foreign Office to prevent any escalation that might damage bilateral relations. By evening, a high-level meeting had been arranged at the Ministry of Defense. In attendance were representatives from the British military hierarchy, Foreign Office officials, and senior staff from the Argentine embassy. The small incident at Buckingham Palace had mushroomed into a significant diplomatic challenge requiring careful navigation. General Martinez was invited to present his case to this distinguished assembly. He spoke passionately about the importance of military courtesy and the precedent that would be set if foreign officers could be ignored or disrespected during official visits. His argument focused on the broader implications for international military cooperation and the message such behavior sent to allied nations. The British officials listened respectfully while privately marveling at how a routine guard duty had created such controversy. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, representing the Household Division, explained the intricate protocols governing the Queen's Guard and emphasized that Lance Corporal Williams had followed his training perfectly. She stressed that any deviation from established procedures could compromise security and diminish the ceremonial significance of the Guard's role. As the discussion continued, it became clear that both sides were operating from legitimate but incompatible perspectives. The Argentines viewed military courtesy as universal and non-negotiable, while the British emphasized the unique nature of royal protection duties that superseded normal military social conventions. Ambassador Gonzalez suggested a compromise that might satisfy both parties while preserving face for everyone involved. She proposed that future diplomatic visits could include specific protocols for interaction with the Queen's Guard, ensuring that foreign officials understood the limitations while still feeling appropriately honored during their visits. The Foreign Office representative, James Crawford, supported this approach and suggested creating formal guidelines that could be shared with all diplomatic missions. This would prevent similar misunderstandings while maintaining the integrity of both British ceremonial traditions and international military courtesy. However, General Martinez remained unsatisfied with solutions that appeared to legitimize what he still considered disrespectful behavior. He argued that Lance Corporal Williams should face some form of disciplinary action for failing to show proper respect to a foreign general, regardless of the underlying protocols. This demand created a significant problem for the British officials. Any punishment of Williams would essentially validate the general's interpretation of events and could set a precedent that might compromise the Guard's ability to maintain discipline during future incidents. The Guard had followed his training precisely and deserved support rather than discipline. As the meeting stretched into the evening, it became apparent that finding a resolution satisfactory to all parties would require creative diplomacy. The incident had exposed fundamental differences in military, culture, and protocol that couldn't be easily reconciled through simple explanations or apologies. The pressure mounted as media outlets began picking up rumors of the diplomatic incident. Several international news services had started investigating the story, raising the stakes for all involved parties. A failure to resolve the situation quickly and amicably could result in embarrassing publicity for both governments and potentially damage broader bilateral relations. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would test the diplomatic skills of seasoned professionals and determine whether military tradition or international courtesy would prevail in this unprecedented situation. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Colonel Sir Edmund Hartwell, a retired officer who had served as equerry to the royal family for 20 years, was consulted about historical precedents for such situations. His institutional memory and deep understanding of royal protocol provided the key to resolving the diplomatic crisis. Colonel Hartwell revealed that similar incidents had occurred throughout history, including occasions when foreign royalty had been met with apparent indifference from guards following strict protocol. In each case, the resolution had involved education rather than punishment, with visiting dignitaries ultimately expressing admiration for the unwavering discipline demonstrated by British military personnel. Armed with this historical perspective, the British delegation proposed a face-saving solution. General Martinez would be invited to return to Buckingham Palace for a private ceremony, where he would meet Lance Corporal Williams under controlled circumstances. This meeting would allow for proper military courtesies while respecting the protocols governing the Queen's Guard. The proposal intrigued General Martinez, who began to see an opportunity to transform his negative experience into something more positive. The idea of a formal introduction to the Guard who had initially ignored him appealed to his sense of military order and provided a pathway to resolution that preserved his dignity. Arrangements were quickly made for the following morning. Lance Corporal Williams was briefed about the situation and the upcoming meeting. For the first time, he learned about the diplomatic controversy his adherence to protocol had created. Despite feeling some anxiety about meeting such a senior foreign officer, Williams remained confident that he had acted correctly according to his training. The private ceremony took place in the palace courtyard with minimal attendance. General Martinez arrived in full-dress uniform, while Williams stood at attention in his ceremonial guard regalia. Major Thompson facilitated the introduction, explaining the circumstances and allowing both military personnel to interact according to appropriate protocols. When Williams was formally presented to General Martinez, the young guard rendered a perfect salute, which the general returned with equal precision. The moment served as a symbolic resolution to their earlier encounter, demonstrating mutual respect within the proper military framework. Following the formal exchange, General Martinez surprised everyone by expressing genuine admiration for Williams' discipline and adherence to duty. He acknowledged that the Guard's unwavering commitment to protocol, while initially frustrating, actually represented the highest ideals of military service and dedication to mission. Williams, in turn, was granted permission to explain his perspective on the previous day's events. He spoke respectfully about his training and the responsibility he felt to maintain the standards expected of the Queen's Guard. His articulate explanation of duty and protocol impressed the general, who began to see the incident from an entirely different perspective. The conversation between the two soldiers revealed the fundamental similarity of their military values, despite their different cultural contexts. Both men valued discipline, respect, and devotion to duty above personal considerations. The apparent conflict had arisen from different interpretations of how these values should be expressed in specific circumstances. As the meeting concluded, General Martinez publicly praised Williams for his dedication and asked to commend the young soldier to his superiors. This gesture transformed the narrative from one of disrespect to one of professional admiration, providing positive publicity for both the British military and Argentine diplomatic mission. The media coverage that followed focused on the successful resolution of the incident and the mutual respect demonstrated by both military personnel. Instead of an embarrassing diplomatic crisis, the story became an example of how cultural differences could be overcome through understanding and proper dialogue. The incident's transformation from controversy to success story provided valuable lessons for future diplomatic protocols and demonstrated the importance of cultural sensitivity in international military relations. The resolution of the incident had far-reaching consequences that extended well beyond the immediate participants. The Ministry of Defense implemented new protocols for diplomatic visits to royal residences, ensuring that foreign military personnel received comprehensive briefings about British ceremonial traditions before attending events at Buckingham Palace. General Martinez completed his diplomatic mission with newfound appreciation for British military culture. His initial frustration had transformed into genuine respect for the discipline and dedication demonstrated by the Queen's Guard. He incorporated lessons from the experience into his own military philosophy, emphasizing the importance of understanding cultural context in international military relations. Lance Corporal Williams became something of a minor celebrity within military circles. Though he remained characteristically modest about the attention, his steadfast adherence to protocol during a challenging situation earned him commendation from his superiors and recognition as an exemplary representative of British military values. The incident strengthened his confidence in the training he had received and his commitment to the standards expected of the Queen's Guard. The diplomatic community took notice of how the situation had been resolved through dialogue and mutual respect rather than formal complaints or political pressure. The incident became a case study in effective crisis management and cultural bridge building, referenced in diplomatic training programs for years to come. Media coverage of the resolution emphasized the positive aspects of international military cooperation and the importance of understanding different cultural approaches to ceremony and protocol. Rather than focusing on the initial misunderstanding, journalists highlighted the professionalism demonstrated by all parties in finding a mutually satisfactory resolution. The Argentine military incorporated the lessons learned from the incident into their own training programs for officers assigned to international duties. General Martinez personally briefed subsequent diplomatic missions about the importance of understanding local military customs and the potential for misinterpretation when different military cultures intersect. British royal protocol officers used the incident to refine their procedures for hosting foreign dignitaries. They developed more comprehensive orientation materials and established clearer communication channels for addressing questions about ceremonial procedures before they could escalate into diplomatic incidents. The friendship that developed between General Martinez and Lance Corporal Williams continued beyond their formal meeting. The general maintained correspondence with the young soldier, offering mentorship and sharing insights about military leadership that proved valuable to Williams's professional development. Years later, when Williams was promoted to sergeant and eventually commissioned as an officer, he credited his experience with General Martinez as instrumental in developing his understanding of international military relations. The incident that had initially seemed like a potential career setback had actually enhanced his professional growth and broadened his perspective on military service. The story became part of Queen's Guard lore, passed down through generations of soldiers as an example of how strict adherence to protocol, even in challenging circumstances, ultimately serves the greater good. It reinforced the importance of maintaining standards while also highlighting the need for cultural sensitivity and understanding. In an increasingly interconnected world, the incident demonstrated that apparent conflicts between military traditions could be resolved through honest dialogue and mutual respect. What began as a misunderstanding between two Professional soldiers evolved into a model for international military cooperation and cultural exchange. The lasting impact of the encounter extended beyond the immediate participants to influence diplomatic and military protocols on both sides of the Atlantic, proving that even small incidents could have significant positive consequences when handled with wisdom, patience, and good faith by all involved parties.